lately we've been doing a lot of dumb stuff on the FZ07, and it's been a lot of fun. And one of the biggest comments I always see about that is, Jake, why don't you supermoto the FZ07? And of course they always say, why don't you throw knobbies on it to supermoto the FZ07? I don't know what people think that actually means, because that's not a supermoto. I guess that'd be, if anything, making it a dirt bike, but not really. I have no idea what to make of that comment, actually. There's been some recent new bikes, though, that are coming out, which have actually made me think of, what would that be? What would that look like if this bike was a supermoto bike? The Yamaha T7 and the KTM 790 Adventure. I think it'd actually be really cool. And hey, maybe, just maybe, someone from Yamaha or KTM, if they could hear what I'm gonna say here, or even from another manufacturer, I think there's possibility here for a really badass bike that doesn't exist, and it'd be a complete new breed. It's kind of like a hybrid supermoto. The closest thing I could think would be like a hypermoto, but the hypermoto doesn't actually have real suspension. It's cast wheels. It's a monster. It's not a supermoto. But to explain all this real quick, we have to first talk about adventure bikes, which I know sounds weird, but we have to talk about what the 790 Adventure is and the Yamaha T7. Now if you look at adventure bikes, almost everything's over 500 pounds. Even the African Twin, probably one of the most capable adventure bikes out there, and it's over 500 pounds. These are big bikes. The other direction is going to a dual sport, maybe a big CC dual sport. They're pretty wimpy on the street, and they're not necessarily half the time that great off-roading either. I'm talking like DR 650s and KLR 650s, XR 650s. There's a lot of 650s out there. Or you start going into some of the smaller dual sports, not the highest reliability, not the highest comfort, not something you want to ride for super long distances, but you start getting to more and more capable machines. You start working down that list there until you start getting to things like, you know, CRF 450Xs, WR 450s, KTM 500 EXCs. These are like the more extreme dual sport bikes out there that are much closer to the MX side of things. Yeah, I have this range here, but you have this big gap in the middle there missing. The only bike that kind of fits into the middle right now is something like a Husqvarna 701 KTM 690. And there already is a supermoto version of those bikes. Those are the only ones that sort of break the mold and kind of can cut the divide there, but they're still more towards the dual sport dirt bike side of things than they are adventure side of things. You can see where there's a gap there missing for a lightweight adventure bike that's capable with a good road engine. That gap can be filled by the T7 and the 790 Adventure. You know, when I try to describe the engine in the FZ07 to people, I say, yeah, it makes good torque, it's good low end, everyone talks about that. I said, but it's just the feel, the power, the response. It feels like a dirt bike engine. It feels like a dirt bike engine that's a bit smoother and has a little more legs on it. Before I even ever heard of the T7, I remember thinking Yamaha needs to shove this into some sort of dual sport style machine. That's exactly what the T7 looks like. It's definitely going to be a capable bike, and if you've seen any of the videos of them riding the thing around, you can tell this is a serious machine. When you look at the 790 Duke, it looks like they looked at the FZ07 or MT07 and said, let's make that, but with a little bit more high dollar parts, and WP suspension and whatnot, and let's take that engine, a 270-degree parallel twin, we'll make it just a little bit bigger, a little bit more gnarly. They just took this bike and made it more badass. I haven't ridden one yet, but from everything I've read, it's a more badass FZ07. It's a little more money, probably worth it. As much fun as this thing is, I can't imagine a more badass version would be like. I'm sure it's great. I have to imagine that's also going to be a great base, you know, once they have that long travel suspension and those wheels to it. They're going to make good adventure bikes. So how do we turn those into a supermoto bike, and what does that look like? Is that actually going to be cool? Is that going to be something fun? Well, I hope so, otherwise this whole video just seems stupid. It's definitely going to be, yes, heavy for a supermoto bike, but honestly, off-roading this bike the other day, as ridiculous as that was and uncomfortable at times, it surprisingly isn't that hard to handle a 400-pound bike or a 380-pound bike off-road. I can't imagine how nice it would have been if I actually had long travel proper suspension. Totally is doable, especially in America. This is a big open place, man. We don't have these tight, bindy little roads, so I think a big CC supermoto-esh bike, a real one, not a hypermoto, a real capable bike would be probably one of the most ultimate tools you could have. The things you could do, the activities. There's so many activities. I mean, there's times that I need to jump on a bike and ride an hour before I start riding my supermoto. That means taking the truck, basically, you know. They said the only bike that can kind of bridge that gap, in my opinion, that's still capable, 701 Supermoto. The motor's got enough legs on it, they can easily hold highway speeds all day. But that motor, if you could cram it in there, just hypothetically, it could be better. It would be better. It would be a wild bike. Funny thing is too, I think on paper those put about the same power down, but a parallel twin versus single, You just have to ride them both to understand. This engine's honestly more torquey and grunty than a 701 Supermoto. Remember, I went and rode that bike for a week while owning this bike. Okay, but how do you actually build these bikes out of those adventure bikes? What do the manufacturers need to do to turn them into Supermotos? The obvious thing is they need to put 17-inch rims on them. And they need to do it with the spoked wheels they already have. They don't need to try to do some cast wheel or some forged wheel. Supermoto wheels need to be spoked wheels. They're just stronger, they got that little bit of flex in them. KTM's got that cool tubeless system. Of course, Yamaha can also just build a rim the way they do the spokes if they want to make it tubeless. I don't know if the T7 is going to be tubeless. 17-inch rims. They obviously need to keep the dual disc brakes on there, rework the suspension so that the bike, you know, is Supermoto built. Don't shorten the suspension travel. Sometimes I see that with Supermotos, like the 701 Supermoto and Enduro, for instance. I think there's like an inch or two less suspension travel on the Supermoto version. Why? Once you get the suspension and the wheels right, which is kind of the easier things, the bigger things you have to address on both bikes is really the gas tanks. You gotta slim them down, you gotta trim some weight off. Most people riding these things in just a Supermoto bike are not gonna wanna travel a bazillion miles. The Yamaha, it's pretty obvious. It's got this big mega tank and this rally fairing. All that has to come off, slim the tank way down, put some normal dirt bike looking shrouds on it. If you look at the concept version, the plastics on the back are way better. The production version, you know, you can probably get away with it. I think the bigger problem though is that seat. It's got that real high curved up seat. So when you change the tank, you also got to make it take something like a WRC. Bring the tank down, get rid of that whole weird front end light thing. I mean, I'm sure it's great for the T7 and its purposes, but nobody in a Supermoto world is going to like that front end or anything close to it. The slimmer the better, like WR450 headlight on there. The KTM on paper looks simpler because the tank, everything, the lines of it are beautiful. It just has these big weird hunky things at the bottom. I found out that's part of the gas tank. I guess it's supposed to help balance the bike and do all this stuff. So I guess there's some gas in the top and gas down in these big things down there. But those gotta go, you gotta cut them off. The only weird thing about that is, you know, the fuel pump is probably down in there. So engineering wise, that might be slightly more complicated. But in both cases, I see you can really slim the bikes down. Anybody who's wanting this bike isn't gonna want a whole bunch of extra junk on it. You know, they're probably gonna want a flat single seat. They don't need to make some storage compartment or some, oh, we put this really trick headlight that folds open into a tent. Like, I always feel like that people are wanting to put something dumb that nobody, don't do that. And here's the thing, in case KTM or Yamaha is listening, make a concept version. See how people react to it, you know, just throw a concept one out there, take it to the shows, maybe let a couple journalists ride it around, maybe a YouTuber that gave you the idea in the first place, maybe you give him one if you actually take this idea. I'm giving you this is free advice here. What am I doing? I swear to God, if they build one of these bikes. Anyway, let's not go into that right now. Now, in case they don't ever make these things and you say, Jake, what if I want to build my own? If you just want to throw 17s on it and rework the suspension, you don't care about the big tank or the fairings or any of that other stuff, you could probably do it. I think the KTM would probably be a little more aesthetically better looking. Because the fuel pump is probably in the bottom of those big chunky things, if you want to remove those, that's going to be complicated for you as an engineer in your garage. The Yamaha, assuming the bottom of the fuel tank is going to stay where it is and you've got enough room to chop the tank and still leave the top of the fuel pump, you're still talking about cutting up a fuel tank, but you don't have to do any weird engineering. You're just cutting off the sides, making it into a little rounder tank, make it so it can take tank shrouds while you're at it, try to get a flat seat on there, and put a whole, you know, dirt bike, you know, like maybe like a WR headlight. The problem that I worry about is that both these manufacturers have sort of, you know, tried Supermotos and bigger, like KTM will probably go, oh, we did with the 990 Supermoto back in the day. But the problem is that wasn't a real Supermoto. That thing was big, it's heavy, had cast wheels, didn't have real suspension travel. That's not a Supermoto bike, and if they're gonna look at that as an example, I think that's a piss poor example to look at. Yamaha in the United States, on the other hand, the only Supermoto they've ever brought over is the WR250X. The stupid thing is they had like a 660 Supermoto thing. This thing would have been awesome in the US, but they left it over there in Europe where they have the tighter, smaller roads where the 250 makes more sense, and then didn't take that to US but gave us this 250. The dumbest thing about that is the W250X is discontinued now, and they go for more money now than I've ever seen them go for. I don't think they realize how popular that bike is at all. And it's not even that great. It's heavy. Why is a 250 over 300 pounds? Don't get me wrong, the WR250X is a cool bike and I'm glad they brought it to America. But why did they bring that 660 thing over here? That's kind of my biggest fear, is that they just won't do it because they'll go, well, we tried things like that. Just do this, make the concept. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. All right.
But Jake, you should just Supermoto your FZ07. Why don't you just Supermoto it?
You really want to talk about that? Because I know it's going to get broad. You want to talk about it? Okay, fine. Let's let's go talk about Supermoto in the FZ07. The front end is 100% got to go. Maybe it's something like a WR450 front end on here, an Excel rim, oversized spokes, because the bike is handling, it's a little more weight, but I'm sure it'd be fine with that. You would be going down to a single rotor, so you're probably gonna have to do like a Behringer 6-piston caliber setup. It'd be nice to be able to keep dual rotors, but unless you wait for the T7 to come out and you just steal its front end, in which case you should just sell this bike and buy a T7 and then convert the T7. That would be a much better starting point. But I'm just saying, we're just playing this game here. So let's say you got a WR front end. Obviously you also got to get that suspension custom sprung and valve. This swing arm, again, it's got to go. Let's just say, hypothetically, you're going to put a WR450 swing arm on here. You might be looking at a custom axle, some spacers, but size-wise, it should fit. You should be able to get it in there. Talk about the suspension in a second, because that's complicated. For the wheel, again, I'm saying maybe an Excel, Talon, oversized spokes, 5-inch rim, 160 tire on the back, probably a little bit shorter gearing than the FZ07 has now. Not a lot. I imagine you probably only want to go up maybe 1 or 2 teeth on the back. The subframe here, which really is connected directly into the frame. This is something you're seeing on a lot of these more budget-minded bikes these days, is that the frame is all one piece. It's gonna have to go because we're gonna have to do some wild stuff here. We're probably gonna remove all this bodywork anyway, and we're gonna build a new subframe on this thing. So you're gonna cut off your points here, make a whole new subframe, and maybe make it where it can be bolted on, taken off. But now you have a shock though that's traveling in this direction, and it's really long. I mean, it's going to be basically under the bike as low as it can get, with the linkage is going to be hanging out under the bike, and the top of that shock is probably going to be above the seat. New subframe, it's going to have a kind of a straight across, because you want to get a dirt bike seat up here, and you're also going to want to make a mount, which is going to be right under where you'd be sitting, where it is on a dirt bike. You have to have the bottom of the shock right under here. So you're gonna have to have strength and all that to hold that shock in there. That means when it's done, you're gonna have to take the whole thing apart and powder coat it. Okay, all the body work, the seat, obviously the subframe, all this is gone. The tank on this bike is probably okay. It's this little sort of nugget in here. It's a little metal thing. So you're probably gonna need to now build your own sort of cover over this, something that's gonna let you tie in some sort of shrouds, or maybe you build it into that, something that looks cool. It's probably not going to completely come down and cover the radiator, so you're probably going to want to get a radiator guard on here as well. There's already a good number of aftermarket ones of those, so that's not a huge deal. But you know, maybe put like a WR450 fairing on here, dirt bike headlight and all that while you're at it. These bars will probably work. That's one thing that can stay, since we already put Carmichael bars on here. I think those will work. Although once you have a taller seat up here, these might be a little low. So maybe not. Maybe you have to put like a CR high bar. You also need to make a tab on the tank and something so you can put your long dirt bike seat back here. Since we're building our own subframe and all that, we can go ahead and build little tabs to hold what kind of fairings we're going to put on here. I say use WR250X fairings because they don't really have any hangover for an exhaust on it. So I don't think you're going to want to try to bring the exhaust up. But yeah, you tie that all in. Oh yeah, the exhaust. Trying to tuck this up high to the motor here is also going to be really difficult. You're probably not going to be able to tuck it behind the frame here with the new shock, and you're going to have to probably relocate the battery to in this area. You're going to have to do some funny stuff here. It's totally possible, but the exhaust is just going to be too tricky to try to run it up higher. I think you're going to have a system with lots of shielding going all the way across here, and it's going to be bulky. Your leg's going to be resting against it. I honestly think it's going to be better to leave it low. That's what all the other adventure bikes are doing, and they're wrapping a skid plate under it. How are we going to put a skid plate under it? Okay, we're going to have to build something that wraps under the bike here, and I think what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to use this point right here, something that kind of hooks underneath here, made of the shape, and it bolts in, similar to how this thing bolts in now. It's going to be a big outer tube that's going to come down. It's going to act kind of like an adventure bike crash bar too. It's going to come down. It's going to tie into the other side, and then we're going to have these bars that run back, and then we'll tie it back into here. Maybe make this thing sit out a little further. This is kind of what holds the rear set on, and we tie into this thing, bolt it in, just make these bolts a little longer. This moves out just a hair, not a big deal. And then we've got bars that run under that. This thing's probably going to be a little bit heavy. The good thing is, when all in here, it'll add strength to the frame, as well as give you a place to bolt a skid plate to. I know you're thinking, but the exhaust, leaving the exhaust down there, you're going to lose ground clearance. Not really. The exhaust is completely flush with the oil pan. The oil pan's right here. Literally actually hangs a hair lower in a few spots. So you're already going to have to build to wrap around this anyway. That's one of the other reasons I say just leave the exhaust where it is. See, I've thought about this a lot more than you think. It's a huge undertaking. I think you're better off waiting for the T7 to come out, selling your FZ07, getting a T7, and then doing this insane conversion to it. Or the 790 Adventure. Either one. Just need to get another Supermoto bike, man. I'm going nuts over here. Those are my crazy think thoughts. That's how you Supermoto an FZ07, how you Supermoto a T7, how you Supermoto an Adventure 790. I've given a lot of examples of how to do things now. Now, it is up to you. Who's you, I don't know. If you're listening to this, it's up to you one way or another. How about that? I don't know what that means. Alright, later.